about to go and meet probably a more famous person than John Ruskin, one of the rock stars of the late Victorian era. So we're coming to the end of a very quiet Addington Street, which gets a lot louder as we approach Brougham Street at the end, which is a major thoroughfare. And what do we see? Let's take a closer look. First of all, we can see a lovely quote along the wood. "I always prefer to believe the best of everybody. It saves so much trouble." And here we are, seated with the man himself. It's a little bit hard to see until you get close up, but here we have Mr. Rudyard Kipling, depicted later in his life. Rudyard Kipling was born in 1865 in India. Throughout the late 1800s, he would have been read by many citizens of Christchurch and would have become quite well known, particularly after winning the Nobel Prize in 1907. However, it's a little earlier connection that I'm interested in exploring today. On the 3rd of November 1891, Rudyard Kipling arrived on a steamer in Littleton Harbour, and the ship the Tulane that Rudyard Kipling arrived on would have been docked here, probably near the railway station, which in those days would have been down there. That would have been demolished after the earthquakes in 2011. And he would have headed off along the railway, through the tunnel, and down to Christchurch. Mr. Kipling was 26 years of age, and he had been sent or being advised by his doctors to go on a long sea voyage, probably to help ailments that he had developed when he moved to London in 1888. However, Christchurch benefited from his presence for a particular day. On the 3rd of November, he was eventually, after a little bit of a mix-up, met by a reporter from the Star newspaper, who then proceeded to take him on a flying visit of Christchurch. That visit took him on a very slow, to his estimation, train trip from Littleton through to Christchurch, and many of the buildings that he then visited, some of which still exist and some of which have been demolished following the Christchurch earthquakes in 2011. But the reporter listened to Kipling's request, which is that he wanted a cigar and a shave. And I think they went to what was then Coker's Hotel, where he managed to get the cigar. He became somewhat enamoured of the barmaid there and eventually wrote a short story about her years later. And it was a little bit further on where they went to a barber's establishment, and that was where Kipling got his shave. The trip also included a quick trip out to see the Christchurch Fire Brigade in operation. They quickly put down a fire. It included a visit to the Canterbury Club, where he left his card looking for a member there who wasn't available at the time. He then went to the Christchurch College, where he met up with one of his old mentors, Professor Hassan, and they had a fairly stimulating conversation. The rest of the journey was taken up by looking at various buildings, some of which Kipling thought were too extravagant for a city or town the size of Christchurch. There was a need to get him on the train back to Littleton so that he could catch the sailing of his steamer, which would take him to Melbourne later on. One of the initial impressions that Kipling gave to the reporter was that Christchurch seemed to look more like an American town than a British city, although the reporter wanted to show him more of the outside of the city, which he thought would bring back some memories of England. But they didn't have time. They just managed to get him back to the ship before its sailing. And so Kipling's one-day visit to Christchurch in 1891 was part of a sea voyage that included Auckland and Dunedin, where this photograph was taken with William A. Ewing by Ewing's son Robert. The voyage occurred well before his most famous works were published, but he was still well known throughout the English-speaking world, known enough for the Star newspaper to send a reporter to meet him and for an article in the weekly press a few days later. The following January, he married Caroline Starr Balestier. The bride was given away by the famous American novelist Henry James, who exclaimed, "It's a union of which I don't forecast the future. Yet they stayed together, not always happily, for the next 42 years. James wrote to his brother William on the 6th of February 1892, "Kipling strikes me personally as the most complete man of genius, as distinct from fine intelligence, that I have ever known." A later, more humorous quote from Mark Twain, who rather liked Kipling, went, "Between us we cover all knowledge. He covers all that can be known, and I cover the rest." Over the course of his life, Kipling wrote a huge quantity of poems, short stories, and novels. Much of his work and ongoing commentary is available through the Kipling Society. Any of you interested in Victorian history and British India will find many delights here. Whilst he has been called racist and criticised for promoting imperialistic warmongering, Kipling was a major voice of the British Empire. That voice still sounds in my head as I recall learning several verses of his poem Gunga Din when I was 10. After several verses detailing how the soldiers treated Din very badly, the poem tells how the wounded narrator gets a life-saving drink from the water carrier and is taken to a shelter. "So I'll meet him later on at the place where he is gone, where it's always double drill and no canteen. He'll be squatting on the coals, giving drink to poor damned souls, and I'll get a swig in hell from Gunga Din." That's a bit presumptuous, as Dean might be going to heaven. "Yes, Dean, 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 you Lazarushian leather Gunga Din, though I've belted you and flayed you, by the living God that made you, you're a better man than I am, Gunga Din." Unfortunately, Kipling was not as self-reflective as the soldier in the poem, and he continued to maintain a dialogue on behalf of the white man, which in his meaning is an honest, decent man. Remember, at this time, Kipling and those around him thought that God was an Englishman. I suspect that this wonderful man of letters, were he alive today, would be a harumphing armchair warrior and a prospective voter for Nigel Farage's Reform Party in the UK. And that is where I will bid him goodbye.